In this episode, we discuss victim shaming. We explain what it is, discuss obvious and more subtle ways we do this as a society, why humans are prone to do this, and what we can do instead.
Let's talk about what intuition really is.
Let's look at all the places intuition and ego show up in your life.
Let's share honestly.
Let's do the research.
I'm Jamie Hayhurst.
I'm Heather Wood.
This is the Intuitive Girls Guide.
Hey Jay.
Hey.
We're going to talk about victimhood, victim shaming, just our culture's view on being a victim in big ways and little ways and all the ways in between.
Okay.
I feel like we both have a lot to say about this, so I think it should be interesting.
Yes, I think it will be.
So I want to start with the idea of victim shaming and just explain what that is, because I also see people in real life and on TikTok like misusing the term victim shaming. I don't know, like sometimes words get like buzzy and everyone starts using them and then I'm like, that's not what that is.
We're talking about something different than victim blaming.
Yes, I mean they're very similar, but this victim shaming is the act of shaming someone who is the victim of an act for their feelings, behaviors, or actions.
Yes, right.
That's what victim shaming is. Victim blaming is like blaming the victim for the thing that happened to them.
Correct.
Very similar, but victim shaming is sort of like, oh, you were the victim of that. How come you have these feelings?
Yeah, I think victim shaming is more like in reference to their reaction to the event, not the cause of the event, but the reaction to the event.
Yes. And I think that people victim shame all the time without realizing that they're doing it.
And I would go so far as to say it's 1,000% projection.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it's also the way we victim shame and blame and sort of our reactions to anyone who's a victim of anything really illustrates like the hierarchy of society.
Yes. Yep.
So I want to talk about that too.
Okay.
But I also just want to say, like, you can be the victim of a crime, but you can also just be the victim of like a bad day or a struggle or
a bad interaction with someone, or right.
You can have a cold. You're the victim of the cold. Like, do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you can. Any time that something is like happening to you, that's some sort of a struggle, you are the victim of that struggle. It doesn't always have to be a crime or a big major thing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I think it's all in your perception of what's happening to you. It's whether or not you're feeling like a victim of something.
Yeah, and you know, again, because we like the buzzy words, myself included, like I don't mean that in a shameful way. But because we like to talk about like victims and all that kind of stuff, sometimes we hear that word and react weird to it. Like we think of, sometimes I get triggered by people acting victim-y, like acting like the world is against them. And like, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yes,
that triggers me a lot.
Oh, same.
And I know that the reason that we are triggered by that is because we haven't lived lives where that was something that you could do.
Yeah, or I felt that way on the inside a lot.
But you couldn't play it out. Right. You were doing the opposite. You were like masking that you were okay.
Right.
And it's the same thing, like pretending you're okay all the time and don't need any help, and outwardly being the victim and constantly needing help and attention are the same thing. They're coping mechanisms. They're you know, trying to deal with something.
Yes.
They're just two ends of the spectrum.
Yes. And
we tend to, whichever end of the spectrum you're on, you tend to be triggered by the other end.
Yes. And there are certainly, you know, like our society values people who like suck things up more, who are less victim-y, because then there's less to deal with and process and manage.
I find the messaging to women very confusing because like, the whole damsel in distress thing is like a real big like thing in your childhood that you're seeing this archetype and these like these stories played out all the time as if like like being rescued by usually a man, like that's sort of like a good thing.
Absolutely.
Okay. But then I think you go beyond sort of like, you go from like the maiden to like the mother or crone energies, just meaning you're aging out of being a child.
Yep.
Or a teenager.
Right.
And you're in sort of like a womanly place. And now you aren't allowed to be the victim of anything ever.
No.
You're like a self-sacrificing martyr all the time.
Yes.
With the Mother's Day cards we hate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really interesting the way our culture views victimness in general. Yep. So I think we need to address all of that when we talk about this issue, because if you just say victim, you're going to picture a lot of different things. But the actual definition of a victim has nothing to do with the level of which something is affecting you or how much you're acting like one. If something has happened to you, you're the victim of it. If the wind messes up your hair, you're the victim of the wind.
Right.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there isn't actually like a like, well, you have severity. To struggle this much or a severity, like anything you are the victim of. And the reason that I make that point is because I think we have a very odd relationship to the word now.
Yep.
Where it's just sort of like either those victim-y people that trigger the two of us, or it's like someone who's like a heinous crime has happened to.
Exactly.
And we sort of don't realize that it's just kind of anything, something happens to us that creates any sort of discomfort or struggle.
Yep.
That's victim.
Right.
And it might sound like I'm harping on this, but I think it's going to be important as we make some points later that it's literally any level of it, because your relationship to yourself being one is sort of like you were saying before, is going to be projected onto someone else being one all the time.
Exactly.
So how you handle like a minor inconvenience and how you handle a really big, difficult thing all affect how you treat other people who have experienced those things.
Correct.
Yeah. And you know, there are some people in the world, Jamie, they baffle us, but they never look at their own shit.
That's true.
As two people who spend the majority of their mental energy doing that.
Yep.
It's weird, but they don't.
Must be nice.
But then they just sort of project all over everybody all the time without any understanding of that.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. So I want to just address to the societal levels, because I want you to think about just a victim of a robbery for a minute. Okay. And you're hearing about a story and someone was a victim of a robbery. I want you to think about like what sort of questions you start to ask to learn more about the story when the victim of the robbery is a wealthy white man.
Okay.
What is your reaction to, like, what kind of things do you want to know? Okay. And you don't have to say them out loud, but you're not going to have a lot of questions.
No.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And
right. What happened?
But then if you start to go into like down the rungs of society, like all of a sudden now he's a black man. Maybe he's an Asian man. Like now what questions, now you start to, people, and everybody does this, right? But like now people are going to start to say that, well, where were they?
Exactly. What neighborhood were they in?
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
What were they doing?
Yes.
What were they?
Who were they with? What were they doing?
Did they have a hoodie illegal? On? Yeah, like now you hear that. And now what if I say it was a white woman?
Yep.
Now you're going to have even more questions. Well, what was she wearing? You know, was she not paying attention? Was she drunk?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. And then you keep going down, like a woman of color. Yep. You know, like you keep saying these things and you go down the sort of like the levels of privilege.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And the questions, you start asking more and more questions. And what you start to realize is that in all of those questions, you are shaming the victim of the robbery more. So the people with the most privilege, we are conditioned to ask less questions of what happened to them.
And believe them.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, your own sort of prejudices and things will come in as well, of course. So, like, I mean, I might, if somebody said, like, a wealthy white man, I might be like, is it insurance fraud? You know, like, because I'm a little bit, like, more questioning of that.
Yeah.
But so, of course, it's not the same for every person. But in general, that's what you start to see. And you can just watch it play out online, on the news. Yeah. Like, you can just see all of that, where people are asking more questions about that. So the victim of a robbery, there really shouldn't be different questions for different people because if the circumstance is all the same, why are we questioning differently? And it speaks to the way we see and treat victims of any kind.
Yeah, and it also speaks to how like baked in white supremacy is and patriarchy is into like all levels of our society.
Yeah.
Like it's happening in your thinking and your processing without you even realizing it.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, because not only is it just like questions you're asking, you're also then treating the person differently. Like you're thinking differently of the victim.
Yeah, no.
Based on the questions, based on the conditioning of patriarchy, of white supremacy, of capitalism. I mean, those are interchangeable terms in my mind, but you know what I'm saying? So like, then things become more and more complicated.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want to address a really big way that we have a really big problem of how we treat victims.
Okay.
And I don't think it's just in American culture. I think it spreads far beyond, but it's different in different cultures. But certainly the way we treat victims of sexual assault is mind-blowing to me. And the interesting thing about how we try to address claims of sexual assault is that we spend a lot of time, and like judicially and also in just like the court of public opinion, like really trying to pick apart consent.
Yes.
Okay. And consent is like this thing that is impossible to prove, right?
Right.
Okay. But we only put this in sexual assault.
Yeah.
Like what we don't add to sexual assault is like the power levels, the power dynamics of the people involved. Okay. So remember when we talked about in one of our previous episodes, I think it was the Medusa episode, of like the whole trope of women sleeping their way to the top.
Yes.
And that the idea is that there's these powerful men who set up this system and have the power in the situation, but we blame the woman who is the victim of having to do that to get where she needs to go.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Okay. But we don't look at that. So like in a case where like that, you see these cases of like, well, both parties in the sexual assault were under the influence of alcohol. Okay. But then we don't stop to go like, well, what's the power dynamic here? One person is physically stronger. Maybe one person was less inebriated. Maybe like we don't actually apply that, and we get really stuck on consent. Where if you understand anything about sexual assault or just any sort of conflict there, like a lot of women will just consent to keep themselves alive.
Exactly.
So it's just very strange to me that like we focus so much on consent. I've seen so many things and books written about it, and like our judicial system is so focused on that when it comes to allowing someone to be called a victim.
Right. But I don't think that consent doesn't actually play a part if you don't believe in consent.
Right.
Like how many times have you seen a story on social media somewhere where the victim has literally said no?
Right.
And people will still in the comments be making excuses.
Oh, but she wanted to before.
Yeah, but she said this, she wore that.
Why would she go to his house?
There? Like, if you don't want to believe someone and you don't have the ability to empathize, it doesn't matter if they said no. Right. Or what the circumstances were. If you want to disregard that person's humanity and the situation that they're in, you're going to do it no matter what.
Exactly right. And the spending so much time trying to prove or disprove consent makes no sense to me. And it's not something we do in any other crimes.
Right.
Like, well, did you hand over your purse willingly when he robbed you? Well, then I guess he can have your money. Like,
exactly.
How much did you say no when he pointed the gun in your face?
Right.
Like, what?
Yep.
You know what I mean? Exactly. Like it's really interesting and strange to me. Yeah. But again, it speaks to, look at these pockets of where we treat victims very differently.
Yeah.
And if you're like, oh, why would it be when it has to do with women and sex?
Right.
Take a history lesson of what the patriarchy is afraid about women.
Right. Yes.
Sexuality would be one of the biggest. That's a place where historically men feel that women have a power that they are angry that they have.
Right. And then when you talk about power dynamics, I mean, that's why sexual assault or any kind of assault can happen across gender lines because it doesn't matter. It's not just men against women. Men can be sexually assaulted Men can be victims of that because there are power dynamics at play.
Exactly right.
That negate your ability to truly consent. You can't truly consent when there's a power dynamic like that. Mm-hmm. Like, to your point, you could say, yes, fine, I'll have sex with you, or yes, I'll do whatever, and not be kicking and screaming and fighting. But because you knew you were going to get killed, or you knew you were going to lose your job, or you knew something bad was going to happen.
You're trying to prevent it from becoming violent, or whatever.
Right. Whatever's going to happen. Right. Yes. Like, it's too tricky. And unfortunately, we don't teach people things. We don't teach kids this as they're growing up. And so then you're just forced to like slap rules of consent on a bathroom stall at a college. Like, that's what I saw like at my daughter's college. It's like every bathroom has like a flyer on it, like on every stall, explaining what consent is. And like, is that great? Yes.
Should consent be explained? Yes.
Yes. Should everyone know what consent is well before they go off to college?
Yeah.
Yes. Like, that's the problem. It's like, it's a systemic problem.
Yeah. And, you know, there's these things where it's like people don't want to teach their boys that. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's really interesting.
Why would you not want to teach your child that?
For their own safety, as well as keeping other people feeling okay. I mean,
I bet your son knows how to say no when he doesn't want to do something.
Yeah.
Why doesn't he know how to listen to it?
Exactly. But then it's like, why have I grown up in a way that like I had to take women's self-defense classes and like physically learn to defend myself from attackers, but we don't want to put boys through consent classes?
Right. Exactly.
Like, that's
then
really
odd. You probably wouldn't need self-defense if more people knew that.
Yeah, it's very strange. It's very strange. Yeah,
it is.
I'm going to move us from here because we'll spend the whole episode talking about it.
Right.
But I do think it's a very important subject that if we could all talk about it more, like there's still this real tabooness to sex. And do you remember 100,000 years ago when you and I went to that woman's, what was it called? It was Mama G. Mama Gina. It was like a woman's seminar type of thing.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of it.
Yeah. And so we were listening to these different stories because there were people from all different countries. And there were like women from other countries talking about how like their fathers had bought them vibrators and like and just
She's
like
from Australia.
Yes. Like, and I just remember sitting there going like, imagine if we didn't feel so squeamish about talking about sex to both genders, but especially to women. And we didn't make it like that. And we didn't make it so taboo, like how we could just completely treat it differently as a society.
Right, exactly.
It really bums me out, man.
It's awful.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I just remember her saying that and us both being like, wow, that's a progressive dad. That's amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah, go him.
Yeah.
But, you know, you can also be the victim of like your like feelings. Like someone can hurt your feelings and then you are the victim of that. Okay? Like that's a thing.
That's definitely a thing.
Okay. And the thing that drives me the most bananas about this is people's reaction to somebody who has a big feeling or a feeling that you say all the time that feelings should not have any kind of like morality attached to them. Good, bad, sad,
feelings
happy.
are morally neutral.
Yeah. Okay.
They should be.
They should be. Okay. Right. But if someone's like sad or mad.
Yeah.
What we do is like, we're just like, can you just feel better real quick? Because it's making me uncomfortable that you are in a state that I'm not comfortable with you being in.
Right. Because again, we don't teach people to be emotionally intelligent, to learn things like consent.
Yes.
But we also don't teach people how to like hold space for other people and like help people navigate, even just observe.
Yes.
Like we can't even, like a lot of us can't even just sit and watch someone be upset without being like, don't cry. Here's a tissue. Shh.
Just trying to make them feel really better.
It's essentially
quickly.
being like, shut the fuck up. Like,
yes.
I'm so uncomfortable with emotions that I can't even watch you have emotions.
Yeah. Like listen, I don't want you to ever be sad or mad. I always want you to be happy.
That's not true. You like me being mad.
Well, I enjoy that you let it out. No, but I actually don't want you to be sad or mad.
Yeah, I know.
But if you are, I am not going to force you out of it.
No, exactly.
Because I don't like that my friend is feeling a negative emotion. I'm going to guard the fucking door, and I'm probably going to be sad and mad with you, or I'm going to like create space for you to feel those feelings so you get to the other side of them. I mean, you can deal with your own emotions. You'll come out of it. If you get stuck, we'll talk about it. But like, we have this reaction because it's like, I don't like seeing someone I care about feeling badly. Let me quickly get them out of that.
Right.
And it's like, that is victim shaming.
Yes.
And I know some people are like, but I'm doing it out of a nice, like, it's not malicious. Like, my intent's good. I get that.
But it's not really. It's actually selfish.
Yeah.
It's really selfish. Like, I'm sorry to
be
rude about it, but like, it's actually it's really selfish to not be able to just allow someone to sit in their own feelings. Just think about that. Like, to try to like rush someone through their feelings because you're uncomfortable. Yeah. Because it makes you feel squidgy about it. Like, that's incredibly selfish.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not sure, if you're like, should I like try to cheer this person up or like let them just ask?
Right.
Is this a time that you need me to like talk you out of this? Or is this a time that I just need to shut up and listen and like hold space for it? I mean, me personally, my brain and my intuition is going to create a plan for you to get out of where you are.
Right.
So I have to be careful not to come in hot with the plan, because then it's going to seem like I want you to do it right now and get out of that space. So like, I'm not saying like you and I perfectly do it all the time, or that you don't have a discomfort with that. Like, you want the person to feel better.
Yeah.
But you're actually victim shaming if you don't allow the person to feel how they need to feel.
Yes. And you can see that like on social media. I always see, especially on TikTok, like people will post like what not to say to someone who's grieving.
Oh, yes.
And it's not like everything happens for a reason, or it could be worse.
Oh God.
Like, there's all these things, like don't say that. Every one of those things is about you. It's about you trying to like fix that person and fix their pain.
Yeah.
Rather than just allowing them to be upset.
Yeah. You know, I had a moment, I was at a funeral for somebody. No, it was a wake. I was at a wake, where you go through the line. Don't get me started on my feelings.
Well, that's also regional for our listeners. I realize not every part of the country does that.
Oh, well,
isn't that interesting?
Great if you don't do it.
In the Northeast, you do. You walk through a line.
Okay. So so just in case you're from an area that doesn't know what I mean by a wake, it usually happens like the day before the funeral or a couple nights before, and the people who lost somebody they love have to like stand in a line
near
the dead body.
Cool. And this sounds real cool when you describe it.
It's great. Oh, I'm trying so hard not to like put all of my feelings of why are we still doing this into it. But anyways, and then people form a line that usually is long and takes forever to get through, and then walk up to those people and tell them that they're sorry for their loss.
Right. Give their respect, pay their respects, give their condolences.
But what happens a lot of the time, which makes it 1,000 times more awkward, is that you only know one of the people in the line.
Correct.
And you're going through trying to tell everyone, I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm so-and-so's.
Right.
I know so-and-so this way. I'm connected to so-and-so like this.
Right.
And then there's this weird like order that people stand in. It's a stupid human tradition that, in my opinion, we need to update.
Yeah, I could use some updating.
Because I'm not really sure who this is for.
I mean, I like the premise of it, but the practicalities of it are a little wonky.
A lot wonky.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like, why don't you all just sit in the room and I'll see who's there? I don't want to. Right. I don't want all of you to come up to me and say awkward things.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
But anyways, I digress. I remember having a conversation with my mother about going through a particular line about how, like, I don't want to say I'm sorry for your loss. That's what everybody says. I want like a better line. Like I want to say something different. Only in the conversation that, in the 10 minutes I was in the line to realize like, well, that's for me. Why do I want to have a dazzling line? I am sorry for your loss. Right. And I'm not going to tell you it'll get better soon. No. Or I'm not going to tell you all those shit lines that people say. It could have been worse. Thank God they went quick or whatever people say.
They lived a long life.
Yeah.
Right.
So I say that, and if it's someone I know, I say, how are you? What do you need?
Yes.
And that's it. And then I let the person answer. And then I know you feel passionate about this. I continue to like check on them, not just like in the couple days after. Yeah. So
we could do a whole episode on bereavement.
Yes. Well, you are the patron saint of losing a loved one. So you're also the patron.
Not only a client, but dead president.
Yeah, I was going to say dead orphan society. Like Jamie wears a lot of hats. She's the president of many clubs.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to, it doesn't have to be because someone died. It just has to be somebody has a feeling, someone's upset, somebody's whatever. Let them be. Let them be. Let them be in it.
Right.
Guard the door and let them scream.
Right.
Scream too.
And to that point, like there's also a line. Like you wouldn't allow me to be upset. You'd let me be upset, have whatever feelings I want, but like that wouldn't go on for days and weeks and months. You would then be like, hey, snap out of it. Like, let's move through this. Like, you're stuck.
I mean, we both literally said that to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Like, so usually so it's not like,
I think you should go to therapy.
Yeah, I think you need to talk to someone about this.
We've said that to each other about certain things. And it's not,
would help.
Yeah. And it's not like, hey, I don't want to hear it anymore. Or I'm not okay with you feeling this way. Right. It's like, hey, it seems like you're not fully able to process this. Correct. It seems like you're stuck in a part of this situation that you can't get through.
Right.
And so like, let's call in some extra help.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think like the sort of like the unchecked behavior of someone who is a victim of something, if unchecked, becomes that victiminess that we talk about.
Yeah.
Right? Like when it's not processed.
Yes.
When it's not supported and healed, then you become stuck in that state of being a victim and it becomes victim-y.
Yeah.
And then you're the person who then clings to being the victim because whatever reason, it gets you attention, it makes you feel safe. Whatever that reason is, like it's a coping mechanism, like you said. Like no shame. It is what it is.
It happens, yeah.
But like it's sort of that, like when you don't heal it and you don't move through it, where it becomes a problem.
I mean, I think that this is why people would like this to be a 10-step program to like how to help somebody through a feeling.
Right.
But the actual answer is that it's an intuitive process. Okay.
Correct.
So like there isn't like, okay, let's say you lose somebody and you're going through grief. It's not like you can go, okay, well, Jamie's been really down about this for 2 full weeks. And my book says at the end of 2 weeks, she needs to start to move on to this stage of grief or start to feel this way. And she's not. So there's a problem.
Correct.
That's not how this works.
No.
You actually have to intuitively and empathically be talking to and checking in with the person to be able to see that and to know that and to understand that. And if you're not sure, to ask somebody else who might be able to and to check on them that way. But that's an intuitive process and people don't like that because people are still very uncomfortable with their own feelings.
Correct. And they're uncomfortable with their own ability to be empathetic.
Yeah.
But also like that's why it can't be a 10-step program is because it's not even going to look the same way.
No.
Like for me, like when something like that happens and I'm like the victim of something, I'm not like laying on the floor crying for 6 weeks and you're like, Jamie, like you need to get out of here. Like you need to get your shit together. I'm fine.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
Yeah.
To everybody.
Yeah.
But if you're up close and personal and you know me, you're going to start to see when I'm not fine.
Yeah.
You'll see, but it won't look the way you think it should look.
Yes, because there is no way it should
that's
look.
what I mean. Like it's not like what you're seeing like in a movie of like laying in bed for 6 months and like it is that way for some people sometimes, but a lot of times it's someone going through life, going through the motions, acting fine, but they're not.
Yeah.
And that's the problem is that like that's not written in the 10 steps.
Yeah, and in the way that you hold space for somebody or maybe have to bring up something that's hard to them of like, hey, you seem a little stuck or whatever, is based on the person.
Right.
Like the way someone would speak to you or even to me, like those are different forms of addressing. Like those are different things like that I'm going to say. Like I think as a general rule to just tell someone like, it's kind of on my radar that you don't seem
right, like what's
super
up?
Okay. And
Right.
I don't need you to be okay, but it
Correct.
seems like you might be a little stuck. And I'm just telling you it's on my radar. Great first start.
100%.
See how they react. It's also good to try to be the kind of person who allows yourself to hear that, as hard as it is, because most people are saying that to you because they care about you.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And then if the needle isn't moving, okay, and again, healing from anything is not linear. You're going to have days that are easier and then days that suck, and it's not a straight line. And I don't mean to paint that picture.
Right.
But if you think your friend's a little stuck, the approach isn't the same. Again, why it's not a 10-step program.
Right.
Like, I know what I would say to you, and
Right.
I know what you would say to me. You've said it to me many times. You point out that the pattern of my behavior is not normal because you know I love a pattern, and
Right.
I can't deny a goddamn pattern. And then you know that I will argue with you about it.
Yeah,
I will say,
but.
and you let me.
Right.
And then you just let that out, and then you just reinforce it, and then I'm like, okay.
Noted.
Yeah. But like, that's not what you would do to somebody else, is my point. It's like, it's an intuitive process to be a friend or to be a support for somebody. It isn't, well, these are the things you should do. And like, sometimes people say, well, my mother told me to do this. And it's like, okay, probably good in some situations, but there isn't a 100% step. You have to like feel how it feels in your body and know what's right for the other person.
Right. But that's what's wrong with this whole entire society, is that like when you are run by capitalism, aka white supremacy, patriarchy, whatever you want to call it, it's all the same, different arms of the same monster.
Exactly.
Everything is regimented. Everything has a step. Everything has like a standard operating procedure. Like you have to follow protocol at your job. This is what we do for that. Like you're taught to check boxes and to follow procedures. And that's not intuitive.
Right.
Like that's a great way to get like an operating line in like a factory somewhere running efficiently. Yes, that does work for that.
Yeah.
Like if you want to move through a chain of command, yes, you need an SOP. But like when you're dealing with humans and you're trying to help someone and help someone move through grief, it's going to have to be intuitive or it's 100%. Not going to work.
I mean, feelings are wild animals that you can't control. You can do what you want. Like you can react from them, however, but you don't get to pick how you feel about things. We have just recently had a conversation about this where it's like, hey, this is affecting me more than I think it should, and I'm mad. Too fucking bad. You don't get to pick what affects you at what level.
Right.
You get to choose what you do with it as a result, but you don't get to go, well, I feel like I shouldn't be this sad about this or this upset about this.
Right. That's your own internal victim shaming. That's your own, that's your own, like, you're taking all of that outside capitalistic bullshit and you're projecting it inward to yourself. Like you're weaponizing it against yourself. Like, I know that's why I say to you all the time, I know this isn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
As I'm like shaking with fury over something. Like, I know I shouldn't be this mad about it, but I am.
Of course. Says who?
But I am mad.
Right. And to what regimented standard are you supposed to be mad about it? Right.
And that's me victim shaming myself because I don't feel safe having the reaction that I have.
Exactly. And mine is, but other people have it worse. It drives Jamie bananas when I do that. Yeah. So what I'm doing is trying to make my issues smaller.
Right. You're trying to manage them.
Yeah. Same as you are. I shouldn't be. Says who? Right. And then I'm saying, but other people suffer more than me on a daily basis. And you're like, what does that have to do with this?
Yeah. This still sucks.
It doesn't actually have anything to do with how you're feeling. But the point of this is if you're not aware of those things, if you can't name them like we are, then you are then projecting them onto everybody else all the time. Right. And all of a sudden, nobody's allowed to have a feeling and everyone's going to be okay all the time.
Well, that's how you get to the point of not being able to hold space is because feelings feel so unsafe inside your own body.
Yeah.
You can't manage them. So when someone else dares to have a big feeling, how the hell are you going to deal with that? You can't even deal with your own. I can't even deal with how upset I am right now with my own shit. Now I have to help you.
Yes.
And like outside of my own body.
Space
like,
for that now.
That's why people get so upset when you're upset. It's because they don't trust themselves to manage it.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So it's like we always say, Jamie, you got to start doing the work on yourself.
Correct.
And then you can apply these things outwardly.
Other people. Right.
Yes.
Yep.
recently, this is not a new thing to me or to anyone, but recently there's been somebody who has become upset with me, who is like saying bad things about me into the world. Yeah.
Yes, they have been.
Okay. And then taking actions to try to hurt myself and my family.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm saying it very dramatically, but like I'm bringing this up because I think this happens all the time.
Yes.
Not that I think this is unique to me.
Correct.
But I would like to just say some of the things that people have said to me about it because it infuriates me.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Can't wait to hear it.
The first one is just keep the peace.
Oh, no.
Whose peace?
Exactly.
Whose peace should I keep?
That's essentially a really polite way of saying eat shit.
Yeah.
I want
to the victim of someone else doing something shitty.
Correct. Like I can't handle the discord that this might cause. You speaking up for yourself might cause. I can't handle how uncomfortable that might be. So I just want you to eat shit about this.
Yes. I hate it. Why would
Loathe
I keep
entirely?
No. What peace? Whose peace? Why do I need to keep it? Why is it my job?
Why don't you get peace? Why does only one person in this situation get peace? And why is it the person who's actually the perpetrator?
Yeah, exactly right. Okay. The next one is don't sink to their level.
Well, listen, I'm probably the wrong guy to talk about this, but
I think you're the right guy to talk about
this. This is that whole like Michelle Obama, which I love. And at the moment it made sense. Like when they go low, we go high thing. Like that works in certain scenarios for a certain length of time. And then after you cross that threshold, it's just a way to keep people silent. It just is a way to shut people up.
I think if we just like change the saying a little bit to say like they go low, we go smart. Right. Is what I think.
We go strategic.
I think would be better. But that drives me crazy because it's sort of like, first of all, I wasn't aware there were levels of morality involved in this attack.
Right.
And why am I above or below a person doing it? What does my morality have to do with what this person is doing?
Correct.
What does one have to do with the other? I mean,
but the truth of that is that like that goes back to like patriarchal religion, that like turn the other cheek thing.
Yes, right.
And that was created to get people to shut up.
Yes.
Like when churches were colonizing land and colonizing people and cultures.
Yes.
Those rules were established so that people would just shut up. And so they could continue colonizing and acquiring land and wealth. And like, so that in itself is a victim shaming and a victim blaming.
It's
like turn the other cheek.
It's saying don't fight back.
It's exactly what it's saying.
Of course I'm going to fight back. Here's the thing.
Like you don't have to be a psychopath back, but like you have a right to speak up, to protect yourself, defend yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do I have to shut up?
Yes. Why don't I get to tell my side of the story? Why do I have to be quiet to not sink to their level? And it's like, I'm not going to sink to their level of stupidity about it. I'm going to tell my story, speak up for myself, and fight back.
Right.
I'm just going to do it in a smarter way. And I'm not going to do it in a way that brings me down.
Correct.
And the thing is, like, the argument I get when I say something about this, like when I say like, I'm not going to keep the peace, or no, I'm not, or I'm not going to do any of those things.
Right.
The argument people get is like, well, people are going to like think badly of you. It's going to reflect badly on you. And my answer to that is always like, those people already had their mind made up anyways.
Right.
Because if for me, if somebody immediately doesn't like me because I stood up for myself, we were never going to be friends. We were never going to be on the same page. Because listen, if you've made up your mind and this is somebody that's like a ride or die for you, so you're not going to listen, me being quiet or speaking up affects nothing about that.
Right. But also like, I am someone who is uncomfortable with the idea of people being upset with me.
Yeah.
But that's programming.
Yeah.
Like when you have a culture of like women or ethnic groups or whatever, any group of people who are all socialized to be afraid to speak up, that makes for like a really numbed out, detached group of people.
Yeah.
And it makes people really easily controlled.
You're exactly right.
And that's on purpose.
Yep. I think like the idea that if like that person's true colors will just come out or like just let that is such bullshit that I think people are blinded to the fact that that is victim shaming when you say that.
Absolutely.
There's 100% victim shaming.
Yeah.
I would also just like to point out that most of this person's like gossipy attacks are against me, but an element of it is also involves my husband. And the different things said to him versus me are astonishing because nobody tells him
what to do,
to take the high road or to keep the peace or, you know, like don't sink to their level. People are like, this is outrageous. Like, and they just like are mad for him.
Because he's allowed to be mad. He's allowed to fight back.
Yeah. But when it comes to me, they're like, oh, I know. But those things that person is saying, like, just don't worry about it.
Don't pay it any mind.
Don't pay. What if it reflects back badly on your husband? It makes no sense.
No, it's infuriating.
It's victim shaming.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
The other, I just want to make one more quick victim shaming example because it's like very minute, but it just happened to me and it grinds my gears. Okay. So this happened in a medical setting, but this is certainly not the only place this happens. I recently had to have an MRI. Everything's fine. I'm fine. But I did. Yeah. I happen to be very claustrophobic. I also am someone who has the occasional panic attack.
Sometimes.
So this seemed like a place where that might happen.
A ripe breeding ground, if you will.
So in doing that, took the proper steps to make the process as easy as I could for myself. And one of the things was like, I had my husband come with me.
Yeah.
He spoke up to tell them that I was nervous because as soon as I start to struggle, I clam up, like lockdown. I'm not speaking to you. I'm not even making eye contact. Like it's difficult. So there's a plan. So the people doing the MRI, which were very nice, by the way, knew that I was struggling as I went in and that it was something that bothered me. It was discussed. Went in, I managed it. I did fine. It was, I mean, it was not a great time, but I was okay.
Right. You managed it.
But I come out of the MRI and the first thing the girl says to me is, see, that wasn't so bad.
Right. So minimizing.
That's the exact right word. It felt very minimizing.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, if she had asked me the question of like, how are you? Are you okay?
Or like
I would have lied and said, yeah, I'm fine.
Right.
I wouldn't have made it her problem.
No.
But like it wasn't okay. No.
She's trying to reframe how you see it. Like she's trying to like show you that it's okay and that you managed it. But that's not actually how it comes across when you're actually struggling with something.
Yes. So until I got out to my husband kindly waiting for me right outside the room. And he said, are you okay? That was the first, like I had to wait all the way to there. And I said, I'm okay. It was hard, but I managed it.
Yeah.
And I walked it. That's all I needed. Just ask me. I can't be the victim because of my own issues. So like I said it very succinctly. Right. I said the truth. Right. But like, you didn't even ask me how it was.
No.
You know, and I didn't even agree or disagree. It didn't matter. She didn't need my reaction.
No.
That's also victim shaming. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we should take a quick break. And then I just want to tell you why the human mind victim blames, like why we do that a little bit more, and then what to do instead.
Okay.
All right. We'll be right back.
We'll be right back after this short break.
You know what goes great with podcast listening?
A great cup of coffee from a great coffee shop.
Yep. Beans roasted in-house, amazing baristas. You know where I'm talking about.
Restoration Coffee. Can we go?
Yes, I need an Americano and maybe a panini too.
Ooh, I need blueberry maple latte and probably a resto bowl.
Ooh, yeah. Check them out and visit restoration-coffee.com.
Let's talk about what we're obsessed with this week. All right, Heather. I'm obsessed with, and I haven't talked to you about this. I don't even know if you've seen it.
Oh.
But I saw it on the TikTok.
Okay.
And I wanted to see if you've heard of it. Have you heard of the October theory?
No.
Okay. So someone wrote, you know how on TikTok, like, or all social media, people will comment, they'll like post something with no context.
Yes.
So people were like, what the hell is the October theory? So some kind citizen commented and explained it.
Okay.
So it says the October theory is a viral trend, especially popular on TikTok, which suggests that October functions as a second new year. It's a time when people realize the year is almost over and feel motivated to make big life changes, whether in personal growth, relationships, or self-care. There's a collective sense of urgency to reassess goals, often encourages reflection, taking action, and embracing the fast-paced nature of the last few months of the year, which shout out to this person for that in-depth
very well
response.
Written and explained. Yes.
And then someone commented under that like a photo of a meme, and it just says, October is about trees revealing colors they've hidden all year. People have in October as well.
So it's like that sense of urgency to like complete the tasks of the year.
Yes, exactly.
I like that.
And so then other people were starting to, which I'm sure is where your mind is going, is that people were like, October theory is literally just the witch's new year, Samhain.
I mean,
it's like that overlap of where sort of, I always say like science and intuition overlap, but this is where like sort of modernity and like the old ancient overlap.
Yeah. Well, because it's in your bones, it's in your DNA. Like that stuff, like, I keep hitting the mic because I'm getting impassioned. Those human traditions were human traditions for a reason.
Correct.
Like those traditions weren't like a patriarchal church head didn't say this is why we're doing these things. It was like literally like the humans responding to the earth and its connection.
Yes.
So of course that stuff's not going to just go away.
And it's not really you sensing the end of the like calendar year. It's actually you sensing like the changing of the seasons.
I feel like every change of season causes a similar thing. I do believe that it's probably like amped up in like October. That makes sense to me because like this year, and people get very attached to like what they accomplish in a certain year.
Right. But also
which
like
is fine.
In changing from like say spring to summer in the northern hemisphere.
Yeah.
You wouldn't feel that as an ending because it would be more of like a time for relaxing or slowing down because of what the weather's doing.
That's a good point.
But here things are dying. Literally, like the leaves are falling. The crops are dying. You can see like the trees dying around you. So it's like it's a visual cue.
Yes.
To like do an assessment.
Yeah, and also in our DNA is the knowledge that the winter holds some sort of like danger and also solitariness.
Correct.
So to me, I'd feel more like, let me make sure I've connected with people.
Yeah. Right.
Because I'm coming into winter, which is going to be a lot more solitary. Like, because that's much more like modern day survival.
Yes.
But our ancestors were like literally getting their provisions for winter prepared, because if they didn't have enough,
they were dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wonder, not to like try to take somebody else's theory and amp it up, but why not?
Yeah.
What do you think like the effects of climate change that we're not looking at on like how our bodies are reacting to the earth and to this stuff? Like, to me, there's about, at the time of recording, there's about to be a second hurricane hitting Florida.
A huge hurricane.
Scary, huge.
Catastrophic.
Probably. And if I'm infuriated of all the politics around it, but if I try to rise out of that for a second, I can feel that urgency of a storm coming in my body, and it's not coming for where I am.
Yes. No, but it's like that. It's the collective.
Yes.
It's like that connection to the collective, to all of humanity.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be hitting you. Like if you have a shred of empathy or intuition in your system,
yeah,
you're going to be terrified for the people that are there.
Yeah, and then when you add to that, like the fact that we know climate change is making these things happen more and more in more devastating ways, there's going to be a effect. It's going to give you this sense of urgency to do something about it, or to avoid it, or to whatever you're going to do. Right.
Yep.
So I think it's really interesting.
I agree.
I really like, even if people sort of miss the sort of ancient pagan elements of it, I like when people sort of go like, hey, look at what the humans do.
Yeah.
Because we don't do that enough.
No, exactly.
So, I mean,
I
like it.
Yeah.
What do you feel like urgency to do for yourself for the October theory?
Nothing. I mean, I love October. So like, and I'm always sort of doing that.
So
stuff.
Is it to celebrate?
Yeah. It's like more of a celebration, but yeah, like a powering down, like maybe like a downshifting. Like you start to downshift, but then of course you feel the inevitable like resistance of that, because you feel through capitalism the rush of the holidays.
Yep.
And like the push and the frenzy. Like I can sort of feel that Christmas stuff building while my body's actually trying to downshift.
Yes.
So it's more about like I like to just try to keep the pace.
Yeah.
Like not completely shut down, but not also like jump into the frenzy.
Yes.
Right? Like enjoy this moment.
How intuitive.
Christmas will be here. You'll be okay.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's just really good to look at like when the seasons change, what are you drawn? Because I think it's different in different seasons, but like, what are you drawn to do with urgency? Like what is that in your body? And like, what really is it? Not just like I'm drawn to quickly make a Christmas list or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, why? Like, what is it? Like, what's beyond that? And I think that that's really helpful.
Yep.
So we've talked a little bit about how projection makes us victim shame. But I thought I'd kind of give you a little understanding of human behavior wise, like what's going on when we're doing this and why we're doing it. Because here's like the real underbelly of the issue. You're going to victim shame in your mind, even if you don't want to.
Correct.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's about catching it. It's about going, ooh, because no matter what, stuff's going to trigger you.
Yeah.
Okay. If someone's having a very emotional outburst in public, I'm not going to just be like, good for you. So great.
Feel your feelings.
Let me do that orange tape around you.
Yes.
And hold your hand as you go through it. That's not going to happen in my mind.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to feel triggered by it. And then I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to create a little distance between it. And then I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to give you some tips for doing this too. But like, I don't want you to think you need to be perfect. It's just if you have an awareness of what's going on and why, it's a lot easier to be able to create that distance.
Yeah.
Okay. The first reason why we victim blame and shame is that we have a lot of trouble with vulnerability.
100%. 100%.
And speaking of that sort of like patriarchal hierarchy, the higher up you are on that, the less society has allowed you to understand vulnerability and be vulnerable.
Yes.
So, and I'm not trying to be like, we should feel really bad for all the rich white men, poor babies.
All the 1%ers.
Yeah, that's never going to be what I'm saying.
Right.
But what I do want you to understand is that most people in those situations have not been given a lot of instruction or understanding or intelligence around vulnerability, or vulnerability itself is considered incredibly unsafe.
Well, and that's why you would then become like a billionaire.
Yeah.
It's because you can only become a billionaire off the backs of working people.
Yes.
And if you don't care about that, if you've not been taught like empathy, intuition, vulnerability, emotional intelligence, you don't care that you're destroying lives to be a billionaire.
Right. As long as you don't have to
long as
let your own
right,
vulnerability
exactly,
show.
exactly.
Yeah. It doesn't mean it's not there.
And then
wreaking havoc.
then you're equating money with power,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can avoid all that vulnerability if you're powerful enough.
Yeah. And in turn, all the empathy, right?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. The other part of this that I think is really interesting is it's this ego vow,
Mm-hmm.
which again is kind of like one of my terms, but it's like a story you have
Right.
in your ego. We have many episodes on what I'm talking about if you'd like to see them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that the world is just.
Mm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason you have that is because it's really, really scary for everybody to know that when you figure out that the world is like not
random,
great.
Right? Exactly.
It's not fair.
Shit just happens.
People aren't out there to help people. You. It sounds like you just become jaded, but I think you just actually figure out the trick.
Well, that's why people love religion. That's why people cling to religion, is because it makes you feel safe in a very chaotic world.
It gives you that feeling of this is how it's just, that
right.
There's something else after if you follow these steps. That's the just part.
Correct.
Yes.
And I'm protected by this thing that
yes.
if I follow these rules,
yes,
I'm safe.
Which
if you're not.
In the current political climate, you see being projected a lot
yes.
by both sides, if I'm honest, but more by one side in a sort of a weaponized way.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if the idea of the world not being just is too scary for you to accept as a child, and then you never go through and do the work, the idea that the world is unjust will become the reason that you blame victims of things.
Yes.
And this is something so many people do, and it is a coping mechanism in a way, but as long as you're aware of it. And I'll tell you a way that I a lot of times do it. Sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time I like true crime. Both of us do.
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes one will hit too close.
Yeah.
It usually has to do with like that mother empathy, like something will remind me of one of my children or thinking that they could be at risk for something. And what you do is you create like an otherness.
Yes.
So you think like, well, it's because they were this or they were that or they
lived there.
They didn't know this thing or they were like, and you make the person, the victim, other than yourself. Okay.
To distance yourself from it.
You have to create distance when it's too scary. And this is similar to the just thing, but sort of like an offshoot of it. Okay. Yeah. Now that in itself, doing that in your own mind to be okay and to be able to walk out the motherfucking door every day is all right.
Yeah.
First, you got to know you're doing it, but like, it's okay. But if you then create, like, go on a podcast and talk about why it's that person's fault and why they're so other and make that the reason that they were the victim, now you're part of the problem.
Yep.
It's a fine line. Listen, all humans have to do that. Otherwise, we would never leave the house.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
You have to irrationally rationalize shit all the time.
Yep.
I get it. But if you start to outwardly blame victims for it, that's a problem.
You know where you'll see this a lot?
Where?
With people who are sort of fanatically for the Second Amendment. Like fanatically against gun control.
Yeah.
Like they'll other anyone to keep themselves safe because they've bought into the fact that it's the guns that keep them safe.
100%.
So then rather than like seeing the death and destruction caused by those guns, they'll create stories about illegals or whatever, or like
they're eating our dogs,
or like the woke crowd, or like LGBTQ plus, all this shit. Like it's anyone else's fault except the guns, because it's the guns that they've been told it's the guns that keep them safe.
Well, that's literally their coping mechanism, right? So yes, that is a beautiful example of that exact thing.
I mean, it's horrific.
It's a horrific,
but it's an accurate
thing.
Example.
But it's a great way to illustrate the point. Thank you. Yeah, there's nothing beautiful about that, right? Okay. In psychology, there's something called the fundamental attribution error. Okay. And so I'm going to read like the real person definition of it. So the fundamental attribution error is a bias that involves attributing other people's behaviors to internal personal characteristics while ignoring external forces and variables that also might have played a role.
Yes.
Okay, this is literally named a thing because we all do it. Yeah. So this is when this is like a kind of like basic example of this, but when you say like, what was she wearing?
Yeah.
You know, how was she behaving? Was she flirting with him? Right. When a woman was sexually assaulted, this is what that is.
Yeah, like you're making it a character flaw or like a character defect.
And it's because the world can't be that unjust that
or
anyone
unsafe.
Could just randomly be attacked like that at any time. How am I supposed to operate if that's true?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay. There's another thing called the hindsight error, which is true for everyone. Everyone has the hindsight error. That's why people say like hindsight's 2020. But the hindsight error is you know all the facts and it's in the past, so you have no value for what it was like in the present.
Yes.
So that's when I recently started listening again to the Something Was Wrong podcast, which is a great podcast if you want to. Yeah. So there is basically people telling stories of being tricked by someone or hurt by someone. It's usually women being hurt by men.
Yeah.
Typically.
Generally.
Yeah. And so you're hearing the story in real time. But like when I start listening to the episode, I already know that this person is going to be tricked by this. There's a whole thing.
Right. You can see it coming.
And so the whole time, do you know what I'm doing? Oh, that would have been a red flag to me. I would have known that. I would never have gone for that.
Exactly.
That's the hindsight error.
Because they don't have that. They don't know the end result.
And I don't say that out loud and I don't actually feel that way, but I hear that in my head.
But that's how you make yourself feel safe listening to it. Like that wouldn't happen to me. I would have seen this one coming.
As soon as he told me he was in witness protection, that's one of the seasons.
As soon as they started putting sashes on me.
That's when I would have known.
I was in the NXIVM cult.
Yeah. But the fact is that you were never present in the moments while they were happening, so you have no idea what that would be like, and you have no idea how you would react.
No, and you don't understand like the power dynamics that are built into things that you like that create a foundation for deceit.
Exactly. Exactly right. Okay. There's a belief that victims are somehow like contaminated by crime. And this is very common in like religious teachings so let's say somebody was like the victim of a sexual assault. That now this person, I don't want my kids to hang out with that person because that person is somehow contaminated by bad energy. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but this is a real thing that happens all the time.
Definitely. Yeah. That's how you get like sort of ostracized when you're the victim of something. You get ostracized from your community or your school or whatever because people don't want to be associated with that. They don't want it to happen to them and they don't know how else to keep themselves safe, so they blame the victim.
Yes. I'm currently reading a fantasy novel. I just started it. It's called A River Enchanted.
Okay.
And in it, like, it's obviously a different world and a different time, but like this boy grows up without a father and is like mistreated by his community because he's a bastard.
It's not his fault.
That's what that is. Right? Like you're somehow lesser because your father left or whatever. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Right. Yeah. That's what that is. Sorry to give you an example from my book, but when I'm reading a book, I'm very like ensconced in that world. And so I think of it all the time. Okay. And then the other thing at play is the empathy spectrum and the emotional intelligence spectrum.
Yes.
So people who are lower on those spectrums can't quite understand and tend to victim blame and victim shame a lot more than people who have a bigger capacity for that.
I'll also say to that, like that's obviously very true, but I think it also sort of goes in the reverse that even if you are emotionally intelligent or highly empathic, if bad things happen to you and you're not supported through those, or you're not allowed to process those, you can then like turn those off.
You're right.
Right. So it's not that you're not, sometimes it is that you're not emotionally intelligent,
capable of it.
Sometimes it's that you just can't manage it. You can't hold it in your body.
You don't have the capacity for it.
So you just turn it off. And so then you sort of digress into being less emotionally intelligent or empathetic because it's just too much for your brain and your body to manage.
There's definitely both a nature and nurture element to those spectrums. That, yes, you could be so squishy and caring and not be able to care about anybody because of it.
Exactly.
100%.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Here's some things to do instead. Okay. Practice emotional intelligence. Here's why. Not just like I do think everyone should do that in general. Like increase your knowledge of that so that your own emotional intelligence is higher. That will just make your life better for everything that you do and everyone else's life better.
The easiest way to do that, I'm going to tell you.
Tell us.
Easiest way, treat yourself like you're a kid.
Yes.
The first question is, how would that make me feel?
Yes.
That's all you have to say.
Yes.
All you have to think, there's no 10 steps, it's one step. How would that make me feel?
Start there.
You're immediately tapped into intuition. You're immediately thinking empathetically.
Yeah.
You're immediately in someone else's shoes. That's all you have to do. Start there and see where it goes.
100%. And then start learning why you are having emotional reactions, not just, oh, I'm mad. Why? Why are you mad? What's going on?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. The reason in this situation for victim shaming and blaming that you want to have emotional intelligence, the biggest reason is that people who have more emotional intelligence are able to create a little bit of space between their emotions and their reactions. Okay. So the more emotionally intelligent you are, the more space you can create here. You cannot control your emotions, but you can control your reactions to them. So if somebody, for example, if somebody hurts your feelings, somebody who is not very emotionally intelligent and hasn't created this space would immediately lash out.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. That's allowed. I'm not telling you can't lash out. That would be victim shaming. Somebody hurt your feelings, you can tell them about it. But you might lash out in a way that's not productive for anybody.
Or kind.
Yes. Right. Okay. Right. You hurt my feelings. Fuck you. You punch them in the face and you go to jail.
That's a problem.
Okay.
Right.
Very low on the emotional intelligence spectrum. Yes. Someone who's able to create space immediately goes, ooh, I'm having some big feelings here. And then takes care of themselves. So they go, I'm going to remove myself, or I'm going to think about this later, or I'm going to do some thinking about it, or I'm going to talk to someone about it to see what's going actually on and why I'm having this reaction, and then decide what I'm going to do about it.
Right.
Okay. That is emotional intelligence. So that means when you're doing the thing I'm doing during the podcast, like I would have seen that red flag, you know, you're doing it and you go, why am I doing it? You check in and then you make sure you don't put that onto anybody else.
Exactly.
That's what we're looking for. Not perfection, just that space to be able to be in control of what you do.
That's where you stop yourself from projecting. That's where you can, but if you're moving too fast and you're not managing yourself, then you end up projecting onto other people the way you're feeling.
Exactly. Okay. The other one we've both already touched on, but like learn to actually hold space for somebody and what that actually means.
Right.
You know, it's literally like just allowing someone to feel how they feel. It doesn't mean you have to have no boundaries and like it gets all over you. Right. It's just like, oh yeah, that's terrible. I really understand why you would feel that way. I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Yeah. We said this in like an episode a very long time ago, but I don't even remember which one it was, but there's something about humanity that we've lost a little bit, but like I think back like to thousands and thousands of years ago, like humans just want to be witnessed.
Yes.
Like that's the core of holding space for someone, is that like seen. You don't have to be fixed, you don't have to be saved.
Yes.
You just want to be witnessed and seen. Like that, like holding space is literally just sitting with someone and witnessing their pain.
Yeah. And just being like,
you're not alone. Like you don't have to be alone in it.
Yeah, you are allowed to feel awful about that thing.
Right.
That's awful. Yeah, that's all that it is.
That's all that it requires.
Yes, exactly. Okay. But that requires you to not be super personally triggered. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. This, I feel like a very broken record. Let go of the idea that there is a total right and a total wrong. We get really stuck here. Like, Again, I don't want to just make this only about like sexual assault, but I feel like it's a prevalent topic.
That's where you see it a lot.
Yeah, but I'm even thinking, we brought this up recently, but like the Monica Lewinsky situation where people are like, oh, but like she did do something wrong, but so she's not fully the good guy, but she was also like people get confused there, and it's like, I'm not saying that Monica Lewinsky did anything wrong. I'm team Monica. I mean, she like did stuff with a married man, but she wasn't married. Anyway,
talk about a power dynamic. Talk about a power
an
dynamic.
Intern and the president of the United States of America.
Right. Like you could say no.
What is happening?
Yeah. Could she verbally say no? Yes. Could she realistically say no? Not as likely.
You think it wouldn't affect the rest of her life? I mean, it unfortunately
did, obviously, but like
either way, yes.
Again, that's that hindsight thing. Like we know how it fucked up her life, but in that moment, what was she thinking? How was she feeling? The dynamic was so skewed.
100%. Okay. But like, if you get really stuck on like, well, one person in this situation was right and one person was wrong. You see this with like, but should we ruin the man's life for it? Like, what? Wait a minute. If we just stop labeling everyone as the good guy and the bad guy. Right. Like, I think of this with the Menendez brothers. I think of this with Gypsy Rose. I say it all the time.
That Brock Turner, like, kind of ruining his life, his swim career.
Right. What about her life? Like, but again, it's like we've got to label the good guy and the bad guy.
Right.
And it's like, actually, we just have to identify like the victim of what and the perpetrator of what.
Yes.
And then we'd be okay. But there is no ultimate right and wrong. That's not a thing.
Yeah, but humans love to do that. They love to compartmentalize and label, you're good, you're bad, you're safe, you're unsafe.
I mean, you're conditioned to do this.
Yeah.
So I get it. Yeah. But I also hate it.
Yep.
Okay. Keep your own fears in check. And by in check, I don't mean squashed. I mean, keep yourself aware of them and work on them.
Yep.
That will help. Work on being okay with not knowing things, meaning like you'll never know what it's like for somebody else. And like that has to be something you're comfortable with. Like I will never, if I was to say like to a woman of color, like, well, you shouldn't feel like that.
Right.
What? I would never do that. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I will never know what your experience is like.
No, and you also don't have to know that to have
That's what I mean.
For someone. Like,
yes, I don't have to know. No, I can just listen. I don't need to know what that's like. Yes.
Exactly. You don't have to prove it to me.
What is that idea?
Well, that's the victim. That's that victim blaming and shaming mentality, is that like a victim has to prove their mistreatment. They have to prove their suffering.
Yep, you're right.
To have any validity from us.
Right, so that we can know.
You should just believe. You should just believe people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what if one time someone's lying? Oh, okay. That sucks. That's on them. But like,
let's deal with it.
I did the right thing by believing them and trying to help them.
Right. I mean, when a detective is like trying to figure out who the perpetrator is, they go like, who benefits from this and how do they benefit?
Right.
Maybe look at someone who's claiming to be the victim of something and go, do they benefit at all from this? Because if it's accusing a man of sexual assault, the answer is no.
No, exactly.
So, yeah. Okay. And then lastly, shocker, learn to call in intuition when you are afraid. When you feel afraid, you need your intuition to come in.
Yeah.
People, again, our culture still can't get intuition right. Despite our years of this podcast, we keep trying.
Yeah. We'll stick at it.
But all you have to do is when you start to feel afraid, go like, what am I feeling and what do I desire? Yep. Baby steps. If you can answer those questions, you're like you said before, now your intuition's in the game.
Right.
And you can start to move through it.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm exhausted. I need coffee because I am currently the victim of not enough caffeine. So if we could go rectify that, that'd be great.
Hey everyone, Heather and I have an ask for you. If you love this episode or if you love the IGG, can you do us a favor? We need you to go onto whatever platform you listen on and download, subscribe, like, love, whatever it's asking you to do. Can you go do those things for us on the platforms that you listen on? It would mean so much to us.
Thanks for listening to our episode. For a way to get in touch with us, please visit our website, intuitivegirlsguide.com. We love hearing your feedback on our episodes.